In my last lecture, I took up the teaching of the 6th century BC Chinese sage Lao Tzu, recorded in the sacred scripture of Taoism, the Tao Te Ching. In our study of chapter 38, we learned the significance of two central concepts in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao and the De. The Tao is the all-pervading principle of the universe, the first cause, the absolute. De, commonly translated as virtue, is inner potency, or the power of the Tao in man. It is also natural goodness that is the result of the Tao functioning in man and in the universe. We also learned about the qualities of those who have superior De, that is, superior virtue, hence power. The person with a superior De does not proclaim his good works. He is not smug about his accomplishments. He is not concerned about outward propriety. His virtue is an inward quality. Above all, his power and goodness come naturally. As it were, they are part of the very fabric of his being. Today we turn to chapter 39, where Lao Tzu describes how the Tao undergirds everything that exists, and how without the Tao, nothing can exist. First, I will read to you Robert Henrich's translation of chapter 39 in full. Then I will give you the interpretation of scholars and my own commentary. And so Lao Tzu writes, "Of those in the past who attained the One, heaven, by attaining the One, became clear. Earth, by attaining the One, became stable. Gods, by attaining the One, became divine. Valleys, by attaining the One, became full. Marquises and kings, by attaining the One, made the whole land ordered and secure. Taking this to its logical conclusion, we would say, if heaven were not by means of the Tao clear, it would, I'm afraid, shatter. If the earth were not by means of the Tao stable, it would, I'm afraid, let go. If the gods were not by means of the Tao divine, they would, I'm afraid, be powerless. If valleys were not by means of the Tao full, they would, I'm afraid, dry up. And if marquises and kings were not by means of the Tao noble and high, they would, I'm afraid, topple and fall. Therefore, it must be the case that the noble has the base as its root, and it must be the case that the high has the low for its foundation. Thus, for this reason, marquises and kings call themselves the orphan, the widower, and the one without grain. This is taking the base as one's root, is it not? Therefore, they regard their large numbers of carriages as having no carriage. And because of this, they desire not to dazzle and glitter like jade, but to remain firm and strong like stone." That is the end of chapter 39. So now we will consider its meaning. The first line says, "Of those in the past that attained the One." Arthur Waley translates this as for the things that from of old have understood the whole." Waley says the text literally reads, "As for the things that from of old have got the whole." He says the got does not mean attained, but got the idea of. As for the things that from of old have got the idea of the whole. This is why he renders the phrase, "got the one or whole," as understood the whole. As I continue comment on these verses, I will read from Winsit Chan's translation. It is similar to Henrik's, but smoother. Chapter 39, lines 2 through 12. Again, these are the same lines by Winsit Chan. Of old, those that obtained the one, heaven obtained the one and became clear. Earth obtained the one and became tranquil. The spiritual beings obtained the one and became divine. The valley obtained the one and became full. The myriad things obtained the one and lived and grew. Kings and barons obtained the one and became rulers of the empire. What made them so is the one. If heaven had not thus become clear, it would soon crack. If the earth had not thus become tranquil, it would soon be shaken. If the spiritual beings had not thus become divine, they would soon wither away. If the valley had not thus become full, it would soon become exhausted. If the myriad things had not thus lived and grown, they would soon become extinct. If kings and barons had not thus become honorable and high in position, they would soon fall. Translator R.B. Blackney comments on this chapter. The use of the one is, of course, a synonym for the way, or the Tao. It indicates the unifying character of the way. This poem is an assertion that the way is immanent everywhere. Winsit Chan says that the one, also referred to as the Great One, is equivalent to Tao, but has different connotations. Tao denotes the way, the principle. The one, on the other hand, denotes unity and simplicity. The uncarved block before it is split up into individual things, and the number that is not relative to other numbers. It is things merged into one. It is consciousness without division. It also denotes the beginning and the origin of things. Zhuangzi used the concept of the one in still another sense. He described it as the synthesis of all opposites. He says, "The universe and I exist together, and all things and I are one." That is a beautiful Taoist mantra. Let us give it. The universe and I exist together, and all things and I are one. The universe and I exist together, and all things and I are one. The universe and I exist together, and all things and I are one. According to him, all distinctions and contraries are combined by Tao into one. For us, this is equilibrium of yin and yang. Holmes Welch writes, the chapter is Lao Tzu's clearest definition of Tao as the order of the universe. It is the law of nature. Tao is not identical with the universe, and yet it is at work everywhere within it. Tao is impersonal and beyond the reach of prayer. In the West, mystics generally regard God as personal, while most Eastern traditions regard God as impersonal. I don't believe that the Tao is beyond the reach of prayer, and I don't see how anyone could so circumscribe the limitless Tao. Eastern and Western traditions see God as both personal and impersonal. The impersonal aspect is reflected in the Tao and Brahman, but the personal aspect is seen in myriad Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the Hindu pantheon of gods and goddesses. And so we can pray to an impersonal God and a personal God. In the West, God the Father is impersonal, but God the Son is personal. Saint Germain gave a teaching. He said, Father is the impersonal impersonality. The Son is the impersonal personality. The Mother is the personal personality, and the Holy Spirit is the personal impersonality. To me, that sounds like a bit of Taoism all in itself. Translator Ellen Chen says, the central theme in the previous chapter, in order to be what it is, a being must revert to its origin, is elaborated in this chapter. Every being becomes what it is by returning to the one from which it comes. In this chapter, the one is what endows everything with its specific nature, so that it is what it is. Just as among numbers, the number one is the smallest, and yet the beginning and foundation of all numbers, so the one is Tao. It is the great creative ground coming forth as the small to become the world, which is the great. The meaning of the one is consistent throughout. It is the humble and small, born of the nothingness of Tao, to serve as the ground of all beings. The He Shanggung commentary calls the one the child of Tao. The one, born of Tao, is the seed of all beings by determining all beings to be what they are. This brings us to the concept of Christ. I see the child of the Tao as the equivalent of the only begotten Son of God, in whose image and likeness we are made. It is the universal Christ individualized for each one of us in the person of the Holy Christ Self, also shown in the chart of your divine self. So the one is born of the Tao, even as the Son, one manifestation of the universal Christ, came forth from the Father, or as we would say, the Father, Mother, God. The seed of all beings, it is like the seed of Christ, or the seed of Buddha that resides in all of us. And as we nourish the seed, we become the fullness of that seed. It is the image of Christ that God made that determines what we are and what we are to be. We do not see the only begotten Son as confined to Jesus in the Orthodox Christian sense of the word. We see Jesus as the full incarnation of that one because he became one with the great Tao. And by his example, we can become the incarnation of that one that was born of the Tao. Here is where the great mysteries of Christ converge with the mysteries of Lao Tzu. The one is the germinal seed of all beings. Through the one we become who and what we are meant to be. If you pause a moment and meditate and feel what you feel as the seed of God, it is the point of identity. It is like the center of a great spiral of being. And because that seed is at the center of our being, we know we can fulfill the full potential of that seed. And that seed goes back to the sense of potency, the potency of the Tao. Through the one we return to our point of origin, which we call the great central sun. The great central sun can be called the great Tao. Chen continues her commentary. All the great creative forces in the world become what they are by attaining and preserving the one as the core of their being. Heaven is clear, earth is peaceful, spirits are efficacious, valleys are replenished, all beings come to be, and rulers bring order to their states. This dynamic, organic, rich, and actively transforming world has its secret and origin in the smallest of all, the One. So is the seed of Christ the smallest, but when it comes to full fruition, it is the consciousness of the cosmos. Until you discover this seed and have the sense of that point of contact in yourself, you may lose sometimes the sense of being centered in a divine reality, centered at a point of seeing and knowing, of purpose and will and decision-making. That point, that nucleus, is the divine gift. It is the divine spark of being without which we could not realize the Tao or our own being. Let us continue with chapter 39, lines 13 to 16. Therefore, humble station is the basis of honor. The low is the foundation of the high. For this reason, kings and barons call themselves children without parents, lonely people without spouses, and men without food to eat. We remember the reference to Melchizedek without father and mother, beginning or ending of days. Perhaps rather than being literal, this may mean that he was the full manifestation of the Tao and therefore no longer had a reference point to beginnings and endings. And so, Lao Tzu says, is this not regarding humble station as the basis of honor? Is it not? Chen's comment on this is, the social political order is an extension of the natural order. Those who occupy high positions, kings and barons, must embrace the small and humble, that is, the One, if they are to be ontologically grounded. Ontologically grounded. Ontology, as you know, is the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being, reality, or ultimate substance. So if we are to be ontologically whole, we have to enter the One. To be orphaned or widowed is the most miserable fate. This is how a ruler refers to himself to show that he embraces the humble within himself. A king referring to himself as pu ku, meaning he is not worthy of his title, is like a Christian ruler who calls himself a sinner. James Legge and other translators render this passage differently. Legge's version reads, "Princes and kings call themselves orphans, men of small virtue, and as carriages without a nave or hub of a wheel." Is this not an acknowledgement that in their considering themselves mean, that is lowly, they see the foundation of their dignity? Chen translates it as, "Therefore barons and kings call themselves orphaned, widowed, and unworthy." Is this not taking the humble for one's root? Is it not? Legge's interpretation of this is, the way in which princes and kings speak depreciatingly of themselves illustrates how they have indeed got the spirit of the Tao. What I understand from Lao Tzu's teaching is that the foundation of the dignity of the princes and kings comes from their humility. We can see in politicians today that there is no true greatness where there is not true humility. True greatness comes from realizing your smallness and letting yourself be filled with the greatness of the Tao. You have to be nothing before you can become something. It is like the process of the self-emptying of the things of this world that one may be filled with the things of the Spirit, and nature abhors a vacuum. Line 17 of chapter 39 has been subject to many different interpretations. Whaley translates it as, enumerate the parts of a carriage, and you still have not explained what a carriage is. He says the argument here is that the whole cannot be known by separately knowing the parts. R.B. Blackney simply translates it as, truly a cart is more than the sum of its parts. Henricks offers another variation. He translates it as, they regard their large number of carriages as having no carriage. Other translators believe that the word carriage is a corruption of the word fame or praise, and that the original probably was meant to be fame or praise. Thus Chen and others translate this passage, therefore the most famous has no fame. He has become famous because he has no sense of fame, no desire for fame. Victor Mayer, using the same Ma Wang Dui manuscripts as Henricks, translates it as, striving for an excess of praise, one ends up without praise. These days we see politicians scrambling on top of politicians for fame and praise, and they all fall down, and they all look silly. The last two lines of chapter 39, lines 18 and 19, are translated by Whaley as, they, the sages of old, did not want themselves to tinkle like jade bells, while others resounded like stone chimes. He says this passage deals with a reluctance of the wise ruler to put himself above his subjects and so spoil the unity of empire. Chen translates the end of chapter 39. The most famous has no fame. Do not tinkle like jade or chime like stones. Legg's translation is, princes and kings do not wish to show themselves elegant-looking as jade, but prefer to be coarse-looking as an ordinary stone. Chen says the intent here is instead of advertising oneself, it is better to hide among the fameless. Do not chime forth loudly like jade and stone pieces in musical bells. The sage covers up his jade under coarse garments. My meditation on chapter 39 of the Tao Te Ching has opened for me new levels of understanding of the words and deeds of Jesus Christ. We all know these words and stories by heart, so much so that their meaning has been neutralized. But Lao Tzu's teachings give us a bright new dimension of what was in the mind of Christ when he thus spoke. In chapter 39 of the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu teaches, the noble has the base as its root, the high has the low for its foundation. Jesus understood that only the meek and humble who embrace the base, which is the one or the Tao, can reach to the heights. He not only taught this, but he exemplified it in his own life over and over again. It is amazing how many passages I have found that are pure Taoist in their statement, right out of the four Gospels. Jesus preached, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. For I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. First of all, let us define our terms. The Oxford English Dictionary defines the word meek in the sense we are using it as gentle, courteous, kind. To call a superior meek means he is merciful, compassionate, and indulgent. As connoting a Christian virtue, meek means free from haughtiness and self-will, piously humble and submissive, patient and unresentful under injury and reproach, inclined to submit tamely to oppression or injury, easily put upon. Of animals, it means tame, gentle, not fierce, not violent or strong, mild and gentle. The Oxford English Dictionary defines lowly as humble in feeling or demeanor, not proud or ambitious, humble in condition or quality, modest, unpretending, low in situation or growth. Jesus is saying, "Ye shall find rest for your souls, because I am the base. My yoke is easy, my burden is light," means, because I have taken upon me the Tao as my burden of light, therefore my yoke is easy. My de is easy. The activating principle of virtue in me is easy. Because I am meek and lowly, I carry the Tao. One must be meek and lowly to allow oneself to be ridiculed, to be crucified, and to become the burden bearer, the servant of all. And yet through all of this, Jesus is teaching us that this is the lesson not only of Christian virtue, but of the science of equilibrium, of the law of nature. If you walk as I am and do as I am, you will receive power from on high.
For more information on the mystical paths of the world's religions, call toll-free 1-800-323-5228. The preceding program was presented by Summit University, Box A, Livingston, Montana, 59047-1390. If you'd like to know more, call this number or write this address. For your free copy of Elizabeth Clare Prophet's best-selling book, The Human Aura, call this toll-free number, 1-800-323-5228. This is a limited-time offer, so call now for your free book. That's 1-800-323-5228.